Welcome to The Game Changer with Dr. Sherilyn, where purpose meets performance and leaders are built to shift legacies. I'm Dr. Sherilyn Payne, executive strategist, speaker, and the secret weapon behind leaders who drive transformation at the highest levels. Each episode delivers bold truths, power skills, and real-world strategies to help you lead with precision, show up with presence, and build the kind of influence that outlasts trends. This is the space where high-impact decisions are born, where influence is intentional, and where the bold don't just lead, they change the game. So if you're ready to rise, ready to lead, and ready to create the kind of impact that moves markets, missions, and minds, you're in the right place. I'm so happy to be here today with my newfound friend, Barbara Hemphill. She is an author. She's a phenomenal woman. She has a powerful message, as you can see right behind her, a message to the nations that she's going to share with us. But let me go ahead and introduce her for you before we jump in. So what if your home or your office is just the tip of the iceberg? Barbara Hemphill, pioneer of the organizing industry and author of Taming the Paper Tiger and Less Clutter, More, reveals how physical and digital clutter are often symptoms of deeper emotional and spiritual blockages. With over 4 decades of experience in a global team of certified productivity environment specialists, Barbara teaches listeners how to recognize the hidden costs of clutter beyond lost time and space, eliminate overwhelm by aligning workplaces with life purpose, use organization as a tool for spiritual clarity and legacy building, turn decades of stuff into a platform for peace, productivity, and impact. Whether you're a high achiever drowning in information or someone facing a life transition, Barbara offers practical, hope-filled strategies to help you accomplish your work and enjoy your life. Welcome, Barbara.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Cheryl, and I'm really happy to be here. When I saw the title of your podcast, The Game Changer, it's like, I want to be on there because what I've experienced in over 4 decades is that clearing clutter is a game changer.
Okay, so you're just going to jump right in. So tell us, you got to be on your best behavior. So tell us, how is it a game changer? I want to hear about this.
Well, I have an example that just happened today with a client that
Wow, okay.
yeah, literally, I left a client. She is an owner of a 65-year-old restaurant, very powerful woman, a major philanthropist, really an amazing, amazing woman. And I don't personally do very many offices, but because of who she is in our community, I knew that it was a contact I wanted to make in order to grow other contacts and be able to subcontract them to the people that we train. And so she invited me to her office, and it wasn't terribly messy at all. I mean, it wasn't a horrible thing at all. It didn't take very long. But what was interesting was she was reluctant to have me do some of the things related to clearing clutter because they seemed too menial. I'm paying you big bucks and you're doing this. Like, for example, I'll give you a perfect example, and I run into this with almost every client. She had books, autographed books on her shelf from people that were autographed to her. And
Okay.
people feel very nervous about letting go of those because it feels disrespectful. But then it becomes clutter. And in fact, as an author myself, one of the things I started doing years ago was I don't autograph books personally anymore. I sign them blessings, Barbara Hemphill. And then I will say to the person, I'm autographing this generically so that when you're done with it, you can pass it on to someone else. That means the book is not becoming clutter, but it's also blessing someone else. And as an author, it's getting your book into somebody else's hands. But the thing was, we just cleared up. She had a plant that was kind of dead looking, and there were some files. They weren't very well organized, and the computer wasn't set up. It's just odds of little things. My company that I founded is called Productive Environment. And we define a productive environment as an intentional setting in which you can accomplish your work and enjoy your life. So it means that everything in it, every physical thing in it, needs to be intentional. I guess, is it doing something to increase your profit or your productivity or your peace of mind? And if it's not, it's clutter. Well, when one of the things she said, which I have heard, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds, if not thousands of times, when we were done, she went over and gave me this huge hug and she says, "Oh, I feel so much lighter."
Hmm.
And that's what's happened over and over. People think that clutter doesn't matter. One of the services that I offer for companies is called a productivity party. And it's a 1 day training event for employees. And we start the day with a seminar called Sometimes It Takes an Expert to Take Out the Trash. And we have recycling stations, shredding stations, a trash to treasure. That's where to put the personal books and the coffee mugs and the flower vases. And then the big thing is a staging area. And the staging area is, this is in my office. It belongs to the company, but I don't need it. I don't know what to do with it. So, and we start the day with bagels and coffee, and we give prizes for finding the funniest thing, the most valuable thing, the most worthless thing, etc. And then we send employees back to their office and say, okay, you have nothing to do today except to pick up every item in your office and say, does this help me accomplish my work or enjoy my life? If the answer is no, it's clutter, you can't afford it, and now you have a place to put it. It is amazing. Employees are like, oh, I have real work to do and I don't want to throw away anything. And then about 2 hours into it, they're like, I'm going home and clean out my attic. I'm going to go clean my garage. Will you come home with me? Because they feel that. And it really is a game changer.
I love that you shared that. One of the things I found is at home, sometimes, especially when I'm traveling and I'm coming back, one of the very first things I like to do is to do the laundry, put things away because that clutter, I just feel like I wouldn't say I can't breathe, but it's just something about having so much stuff around that's unnecessary. And even the idea of shopping, purchasing something, giving something away, purchasing something, throwing something away that you no longer need, just keeping things as light as you possibly can. And I agree, you do feel differently. It just makes you makes you feel more productive. Like now I can think, now I know this is my next step versus I'm stuck, there's nothing to do. So I really appreciate that. I've never seen that in an organization. How did you get that idea?
Well, my business started quite by accident. I was trained as a musician. Originally, I taught school. I graduated from school with a degree in music. I taught school for 1 year and said, there has to be another way to make a living. I can't do this. And then my first husband and I lived in India for almost 5 years, and we adopted 3 orphan children, one with special needs. And then we moved back to New York City, and he worked for a nonprofit and didn't make enough money to pay for living in New York. So I needed to go to work. But I wanted my kids to be first. So I decided the way to do it would be to find a problem in the world that I could solve that people would pay me for. And to do that, I just took my kids to the playground and I would just sit and listen to what people were talking about.
Wow.
And I began to hear people talking about clutter and disorganization and time management and things. And I thought, wow, they didn't have my mother. Now, let me just say, and listeners may not believe this if I didn't say it, I am not a naturally organized person. As I say, I was an artist. I was trained as a musician. I've been diagnosed with ADHD. I love to start things. I don't like to finish things. I like the big picture and I hate the details. So if I hadn't been blessed to be grown up to be born and raised on a farm in Nebraska with a father who was a farmer, so if you don't have systems, you won't have the cows won't give milk and the crops won't grow. And my mother was the assistant to a bank president for 46 years. So she just lived by systems and we live by system. I didn't understand until I got married and had young children and would go to other people's houses that not everybody had my mother. And I just grew up thinking that's the way you did business. And if you aren't born organized and you don't have a parents to show you, we certainly don't teach it in school. We don't teach, I'll remember I
Right.
was working with a pediatric surgeon one time, and we were organizing back in the days when you got these big, thick journals, and you go into
Mhm.
people's offices and they would have in 1, 2, 3 feet. Oh, I'm going to read these articles. This is really important stuff. And so I had created something called just-in-time reading. And the idea was that when the magazine came in, you would tear out the articles that were of value to you, and you didn't read them then. You put them in what we don't use the term filing system, we use the term finding system. We would put it in our finding system, and then when you were going to need that, you knew where to get it. And he said, they should teach us this in medical school, because it meant that when he was going into a particular kind of surgery, he could go to his finding system and find all the latest articles that he'd written right on that. And he just absolutely loved it.
Wow.
So I just started the business by running a $7 ad in a New York City newspaper that said, disorganized, I organize closets, files, kitchens, you name it, call Barbara Hemphill. And I got 3 crank calls from guys trying to pick me up. And the third call was from a 55-year-old widow whose husband was an attorney, and he died very suddenly and left, and he was a solo practitioner and left piles of paper everywhere. And she had no clue what to do. And I just went in and started looking at the piles and figuring out how to sort them, and quickly found out as I continued to organize that paper was the number one challenge, that it was the hardest thing. We could do the closets and the cupboards and the kitchens, but paper, because it's not the paper itself, it's what the paper represents. It represents your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your expectations, and you have to make decisions. And my business has been based on 4 words. Clutter is postponed decisions. And so you have to make a decision. And once you make the decision, you have to have a way to implement the decision. We call that the magic 7. But in order to decide, you have to go through the emotion that that paper represents. And sometimes people are not willing to do that. And they
So
don't
get
understand it. I mean, they don't even know understand it. So there was a friend of mine, and I knew her, she's a local person, and she'd often say, "Oh, you just die if you saw my office." Everybody says that. Like, I don't care. It's your office. If you don't, I really don't care. But then she was taking a new job. And so I said to her, I said, "I'll gift you 4 hours of my time to organize your office before you take this new job." Well, she said again, "Oh no, I don't want you to see my office." I said, "Oh, yeah, I don't have to." I said, "Put your papers in a box and bring them to my office." Now we do work virtually, but back then we didn't. So I said, "Put your papers in a box, bring them to my office, and we'll do them." And after about a couple hours, she was just ecstatic. Oh, so excited. And I said, "So I'm really curious, why were you so reluctant to take what I was giving you as a gift?" And she said, "I hired 3 organizers in 2 states and paid over $10,000. And I was worse off now, before I started with you, than I was then." I said, "So I have a question. What did I do differently than you experienced?" And she said 2 things. One, I never understood that my papers were postponed decisions. She said, I never thought of it that way before. And we say that there's only 3 decisions you can make. We call it the art of file management, which is action, reference, or toss. Those are the only 3 decisions you can make about a piece of paper. But she said the second thing was, you didn't tell me what I should do. You asked me what I was willing to do. And organizing is an art form. And that's why after I'm 78 years old, I've been doing this 47 years, and I love it more today than ever, because God did not create any 2 people. Everybody's different. And so it's like you paint a picture of what success looks like, and then I'm going to help you get there.
I love that. Okay, so I got to back up though, because every time you tell me your age, it just blows me away. And I just feel like you're bragging.
No, you know why I say it? I mean, the reason I literally say it is because so many women, in fact, several years ago, I was getting an award, and there was a woman there who was bemoaning the fact that it was her 50th birthday. And I looked at her and I said, I can tell you that my years between 50 and 75 have been infinitely better than my years between 25 and 50. And so
Wow.
I share it not to brag, but to encourage other women to know that life can get better. And my years between 75 and 78, I had some major medical issues prior to 75. My years between 75 and 78 have been my best ever.
I remember you said that, but you look amazing. You look really good. So I would have never thought that you were 70,
Well,
78.
I have to give my mother credit. I mean, I got good genes. She was working. I don't know if I told you this story, but she was working when she was 80. And she told my brother and me, she said, "Do not give me a birthday party." And we said, "Well, okay, Mom. I mean, we were going to, and but why not?" And she said, "Because people will treat me differently if they know I'm 80."
I love that. That's right. We don't want people treating us any differently. Well, you look amazing.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, when you are helping people at their home, helping them with the clutter, I'm just blown away that you can even do this virtually. So that's a whole nother story. But what problems do you see that you believe other people often ignore other than making the decision of what to do with this particular item? But anything else that you see that they're ignoring and they may not even realize it?
You mean they're ignoring it as being clutter? Is that what you're saying?
Just being clutter or anything else you're seeing, that you're not really dealing with this particular issue. It's not really this, but it's something else. And one of the things I know that you say that clutter is never about the stuff. It's really about something going on beneath the surface, beyond the surface. And we've talked about some personal things before, but I really want to see, are there some things that you see, that problems that you see that from, I see this, I walk in, maybe it's a hoarder, and they are not dealing with some other things.
Well, so the book I wrote, Less Clutter, More Life, the premise of that book, which is a beautiful art book, it's a small book, but it's got gorgeous photographs that my friend took and put in it. And the premise of it is that physical and digital clutter is a symptom of emotional and spiritual clutter. And I have proven that over and over and over with clients. And part of the services that we offer, we've discovered that to help, we work with people primarily in groups because we
Mm.
do it virtually and we do it in small groups, and but also personalization. It's not just everyone's different, but we've discovered that in order to clear clutter, there are three things that are necessary. First of all, a system. We use the acronym of system of saving you space, time, energy, and money. Every time you do something repeatedly, you need to have a system. You cannot clear clutter randomly. Secondly, you need accountability because clearing clutter is not easy. If it were, you would have done it by now. And we're all more willing to be more accountable to other people than we are ourselves. That's why tomorrow morning it's Saturday morning, and Saturday morning I will go to Stretch Lab because I like to go where somebody else is there and they'll do it with me. Would I do it at home? No way would I do it at home. So accountability is good. But the other thing that we've seen has really been the tipping point. I love Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point book because that's really a core to what kind of got me started. But I found that the tipping point with the success of our program has been the community because there is so much shame about clutter. Because it is a game changer, but people don't know it's a game changer. They're very ashamed. I should be able to do this myself. In fact, what you will find, I think, very interesting, if you do a search on the internet for clutter is postponed decisions, you'll see that probably the majority of times that people quote me, they add an adverb. They will say clutter is simply postponed decisions, or only postponed decisions, or merely postponed decisions. So let me ask you, if you have difficulty making decisions, like you're holding this piece of paper or this tchotchke or this whatever, and you're having trouble, somebody says, and just make a decision. And if you're having trouble making a decision, how does that make you feel? So
Are
I
you,
was in Barnes and Noble signing Taming the Paper Tiger years ago, and I made that comment. And when I was done, a young man in his 20s came up to me and he said, "My apartment is so full of stuff." He said, "Mostly paper. I haven't had anybody in it, including family, for months. And he said, I come home at night and I say, okay, tonight I'm going to clean up this paper. And he said, the only flat surface I have is my bed. So I literally start sorting in my bed. And he said, I become paralyzed. And he said, there are nights when I shove the paper and crawl into bed with my paper. And then he looked at me and he said, my mother died when I was 6. Are you telling me I have to deal with the grief of losing my mother before I can manage my paper? I said, well, I can't answer that because I'm not a mental health professional. But what I can tell you for sure from my experience is that if you find someone you trust, probably not a family member in most cases, who can help you decide what you want and need to keep, you will solve the paper problem. Well, I was speaking to a group of 700 executive women at a university, and I told that story. And a woman, probably in her 50s, came up and just tears coming down her face. And she said, you just saved my marriage. And I said, wow, that's pretty dramatic. Do you mind elaborating? And she said, I came to this conference with the intention of telling my husband, to whom I've been married 13 years, that I was leaving because he's a pack rat and I have allergies and I can't keep things clean. And then she stopped and she said, I never realized until I heard you that it wasn't that he wouldn't let go, but that he couldn't. His mother died when he was 7. So I said, may I make a suggestion? She said, yes. And I said, go home and say something to the effect of, I never understood before how important all this is to you. Let's work together to see how we can keep it and still live together. And they didn't hire me, but I stayed in lunch with them in touch with them for about 8 months. And the minute she took that approach, things changed because the more you try to force somebody else to do it, the more they resist. And one of the questions I get asked all the time is, what do you do when you live or work with? I mean, I have people who say my boss is the mess, you know. And my answer always is you start with yourself. And I'm married. I'm married to a retired Army colonel. And when we got married 38 years ago, I thought, oh, well, he'll be an organized person. Oh, was I ever shocked? And at first I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be the end of my marriage because how am I going to have a business? And then I realized, wait a minute, he's not my client, so I don't have to worry. So people ask me, how do I cope? And I said, it's his house as well as mine. So there are boundaries. And if you come to my house, you can very easily tell whose part of the house is whose. But here's the thing that has saved my marriage is sometimes his stuff really does overwhelm me. When it does, I find something of my own to put in order. We all have things that are not perfectly in order. And what will happen is when I put my energy on organizing my own, it takes away the angst. It's amazing.
That's wonderful. Huh, I feel like just breathing even with that because when I think about it, what I'm hearing from myself is that you may not be a pack rat. And I like things to be in the right order. You take this out, you put it right back in the right spot. And so I'm wondering about the compartmentalizing. Do people compartmentalize things? And
What do you
so,
mean? Tell me what you mean.
meaning, how everything has to have its, you hear people say everything has to have its place, right? And a place for everything.
No, okay, yes, that's right. That part is right. But the way most people say it is a place for everything and everything in its place. And
Mhm.
that's a lie.
Right.
Because life is messy. It's half right. Yes, the
Mhm.
clutter is not the problem. The problem is when there's clutter and you don't know what to do with it. If there's just clutter and you just haven't taken the time to put it away, that's a whole different story. It's kind of like people will say, handle a piece of paper only once. Well, that's a lie too. Because if you have a pile of papers and you say, I'm going to handle them only once, you'll pick it up and go through 5 of them, and then you get interrupted and you never get to the bottom of the paper. And the bottom paper was the one that was the most important, and you never got there there's so many little tweaks on it to make it get right. So I'm not sure what you mean by compartmentalized. Tell me what you mean about that.
So I'm meaning that how sometimes with people they have let's see, they don't deal with certain things, right? And
Yeah,
so you put it in a drawer, never deal with it again. You
sure.
never put it back
Absolutely.
out. Right. So it's in order or in its space, but you're not really dealing with that particular thing in an effective way. So it still is clutter in a sense because you're not, getting to the resolution or the root of it. And so
Oh,
I think it's the opposite of, the pack rat, right? So it still is something that needs to be dealt with from that
well,
emotional, mental standpoint.
well, there's a couple of things. One is we use what we call the cost factor, which is you can keep everything you want if you're willing to pay the price. And the price is time, space, money, and issue. It's not a moral issue. In fact, it's been 30 years ago now, but I had a client, a public relations client in Atlanta. It was back when it was paper, not digital like it is now. She literally had a file room with 35,000 files and 2 file clerks. Did she need it? No, probably not. But she was willing to pay the price. I mean, it was important enough to her to do it. It's not a moral issue. It's, can you accomplish your work and enjoy your life? Is it taking you away from what you really were meant to do?
Right, right.
So
So I have a question for you.
there's one thing about compartmentalize that would probably be helpful. One of the favorite questions I like to ask people, just randomly, I'll ask them, this is a question if you left this earth tonight, what regret would you have?
Oh, that's a good question. If I left this earth tonight, what regret? Oh, if I left this, do you want me to answer that question?
You're welcome to do it, but you don't have to, but it's something to think about.
Okay, I will think about that. I have an answer. I do have an answer.
So let me explain the reason that's a form of clutter to me. So
Hmm.
if there's something so I'll give you an example out of my own life. When I was first prompted to answer that question, it's been 3, 4 years ago, I guess now. And the first thing that came to my mind was I don't have a good relationship with my daughter. It wasn't a bad relationship, it just wasn't a good one. Wasn't what I dreamed of. But she lived several states away, and I just never saw her. And I'd tried to do different things, but just nothing. And I made the comment to the person who challenged me to ask that question. It's like, well, I've done everything I can do. He said, no, you haven't. There's always something else you could do. So I thought about it. I thought, well, yeah, and that I think was that in January. And I said, okay, if I haven't connected with her by Mother's Day, I'm going to get on an airplane and fly to her doorstep.
Wow.
And 2 months later, we ended up talking. So it's like when you set an intention, and today we have a wonderful relationship. So I think the question, if I left this earth tonight, what regret would I have? I think that is the most significant clutter in your life.
That's amazing. I do have an answer for that. And it's very similar with the family member. So it's interesting because that's immediately what was coming to mind.
Hell, that's
Or
funny that I would have
yeah.
the same example. Well, that just illustrates that the most important thing in our lives is our relationship. And interestingly enough, Harvard released a study about how people are using AI. And it said the number one way was companionship and therapy. And the number two way was organizing my life. And I about fell off my chair because in the decades I've been doing it, what I have found hands down is the critical factor in organizing your life is your companionship with your creator so that you can be who you were intended to be.
Love it. I believe that. I believe that. And it should take up so much space in your life. Faith is a big part of my life, so I'm going to say that and not pushing that on the listeners. Everyone is different, right? But just thinking
Well,
about
believe
it.
in something. I
Right.
mean, believing in something.
I agree.
It doesn't have to be what I believe in, but there has to be something that drives you for why you were born. We need to be aware of this. I was put on earth to accomplish this, and anything that prevents us from accomplishing that is clutter.
Agreed. Agreed. So let me ask you a question. I know that it appears that you do such impactful, transformative work. And how did you get to the place of the mental aspect, the spiritual, the emotional aspect of the work that you do starting with just helping people to declutter? Like, what was that path like for you?
Well, it just evolved. Okay. So originally it was going to be closets and kitchen. I mean, originally it was closets, kitchens, and garages. In fact, I had a client who was an astrophysicist, and I was cleaning his garage, and we were cleaning boxes of papers, and he was laughing. And he said, if anybody had ever told me that I'd be laughing cleaning out the garage, I would tell them they were crazy. So it just evolved. And then I realized I can remember one day standing in a kitchen and saying, okay, I'm not doing any more kitchens. I've seen all the Tupperware I can ever stand. It's like it's over. So it evolved, and then it was paper, and then it was digital. So my company used to be Paper Tiger Institute. And then when we moved to digital, I renamed it to Productive Environment Institute because I didn't want people to think that I was old fashioned or that I didn't know how to deal with digital. So I changed it to digital. But then as I worked with hundreds of clients individually, that was when it just became so clear to me that the real problem was the emotion behind the stuff. It wasn't the stuff. And frankly, if it were just the stuff, I would have gotten bored and quit forever because it's boring. I mean, organizing stuff is boring, but it's not boring if you're looking at what's the emotion behind this stuff? What is this for? Why do you care about this? And then it becomes interesting because it develops very deep relationships. And so it has just evolved. And for a long time, when I first started organizing, I never said the name of Jesus because I was grew up in a church environment where there was some pressure that made it unhappy, and I didn't want to offend anyone. But I used to sit in my car and pray before I went in that other people would feel the love of Jesus, whether I ever mentioned his name, and usually I didn't. And then I began to realize I would say God, I was like, okay, that feels more generic. And now my license plate says Hope Fool. And when people ask me why, I say I'm a fool for Jesus. And HOPE stands for Help Others Pursue Entrepreneurship, which I've been doing for 40 years. And so I feel called now to be far more, not to force people, but to plant the seed. It's not my job to tell people what to believe in. It's just my job to say, the reason I feel better between 75 and 78 is because my relationship with my creator has grown.
And how has that relationship grown?
Well, I spend a lot more time doing nothing.
Mm,
The critical factor for me is getting up early in the morning and having time in prayer, meditation, Bible reading, listening to YouTubes, writing, journaling, whatever. And I had an experience this week. We're doing some renovation in our house, and the workers have started at 7:30 in the morning, which means my husband wakes up earlier, which means I don't have my quiet time. And so one day this week I didn't have my quiet, and I had a awful day. And I said, this is it. This is my non-negotiable. And when I talk to people about what is the most important thing in being successful, and hands down, the most important thing is before you turn to your phone. In fact, Perry Marshall is one of my favorite coaches, and all of his clients are required to do what he calls Renaissance time, which means spending at least 20 minutes every morning reading something before the printing press.
okay.
And he said the reason is that's wisdom if it's lasted that long. And then he always adds, and if you don't know what to read, just do Proverbs because there's 31 chapters and you do one a day. So it's like, so for me, that's how that has grown. And then as I mean, I tried to commit suicide when I was 11. I was in a mental hospital for depression when I was 40. My first husband divorced me. I was absolutely devastated. I mean, I've been through a lot of things in my life that I would never have gotten through without my relationship with God. And that's what's built my business. I mean, it's like not saying, God, this is what I want to do, but saying, God, what do you want me to do?
Wow, that's remarkable. Okay, so now we got to go down this path. So you
Okay.
spent time in a mental hospital, but it impacted in your business. So you were able to use that experience and it helped with your business. Please tell me more.
Well, I have to tell you God's sense of humor, because this was a setting in which you had a roommate, and my
Okay.
roommate was a hoarder. She literally had a second house because she couldn't get rid of the clutter, and she kept that house and bought another one
In the same city.
in the same city, in the same neighborhood.
That's what I was going to say. The same neighborhood.
Yes,
Wow.
yes, yes. And one of my, I just talked with a counselor yesterday, and I said, I believe that all counselors, part of the intake should be to find out what the environment is that their patients live in.
Hmm.
Because I told my roommate there, I can guarantee you, if you do not deal with that clutter, you will end up right back here again.
Wow. Wow. So you were
So,
already in business doing the work,
mhm.
found yourself there, and then
Yeah, I
you're
was dealing,
helping someone there.
well, I was dealing with feeling that I wasn't hearing from God. That was really my biggest, I mean, that's, well, let's go back even farther than that. When I was a child, my grandfather used to say, God told me this, God told me that. And we would have revival meetings every spring and every fall. And I would go to the altar and cry my eyes out and say, Dear God, please talk to me like you do to granddad. And that never happened. And one time he said, or at least this is what I recall, and he's not alive to confirm it, but I recall that he said, if you don't hear from God, it's because you have skeletons in your closet. And it wasn't until 30 years later I thought, isn't it ironic that I started a business cleaning out closets? And so then I married a man who was going to theology school, because I'm thinking, okay, if I can't be close to God, maybe if I marry somebody who's close to God, maybe that'll help. And after 14 years, he divorced me. So I felt like God divorced me. And so it sent me down this terrible hole of feeling like I never questioned that God loved me, but I just couldn't hear from him. And that was a long battle, and has been a long battle up until, say, like 3 years ago. And 3 years ago, I went to a conference, I mean, a seminar that had a breakthrough. And so I hope what this says to listeners is, just don't give up.
Right.
There's always other resources and other places to go to find help, and never stop growing and learning, because it is so exciting. And that's what the world, we need to change the world right now. I mean, the world is in one incredible mess, and we can be salt and light in that world by the way we live.
I love that. Thank you. Barbara, before we leave, what's the one piece of advice that you would encourage our listeners to listen to or take?
To ask the question, what is one area of my life that needs to be organized for me to feel happy with my progress? And then when you get that answer, we have a 5-step process that we use to address it. The first one is state your vision. It's like, okay, if that area of my life were organized, what would it look like? What would it feel like? What would I be able to do? Without a vision, the people perish, right?
Absolutely.
Step 2, identify your obstacles. What's preventing you from doing it? What might prevent you from doing it? Step 3, commit your resources. How much time are you willing to spend? How much money? Who can help you? What software do you have? Whatever. And then step 4, and my daddy farmer used to say, where the rubber meets the road. Step 4 is design and execute your plan. So in order to reach this vision, overcoming these obstacles with these resources, put together a plan. And then the 5th one is where most people fall off, which is sustain your success. Because most plans, I mean, my company's had 7 different names. I mean, I just talked to a new entrepreneur today, and I said, if you are not failing fast, you're not going to grow, because that's how we learn, is by failing fast. And so, and that's also why I mentioned earlier that we found our program works, because we're in community. We have accountability and we're community. So if it's not working, we can go back and every single thing that you say, think, or feel about that thing you want to solve, it's either my vision's changed. I thought I wanted to do this, but now I'm going to do this. Or there's a new obstacle, or there's a new resource. And then you would make that adaptation, and then you can go back and design an executive plan, and you will be able to sustain your success.
I love that. So now you've given us I'm going to say, practical strategy of how we can become successful entrepreneurs. And I love that because that's your hopeful on the back of your license plate, or yeah, your license plate. So
Hopeful, hopeful.
hopeful. So I love it, love it, love it. Well, thank you for coming on today to share with us some game-changing strategies and principles of how we can keep our life organized, our spirits lifted, and begin to move forward.
Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation, and I look forward to meeting you one day.
You're welcome. Me as well. One more question for you before we go.
Oh,
Where
sure.
can our audiences find more of you?
Just go to lesscluttermorelife.com.
lesscluttermorelife.com.
And that's a 14-minute, it's a 14-minute training program that kind of introduces you to the concepts. And then you can always go to my website, barbarahemphill.com. And you can reach out there. I do a 30-minute discovery session with anyone to help them get on the right track. You know, like, what is it that you want to do, and help you get to where you're going, whether we provide the service or we send you to someone else.
Perfect. No excuses, people. No excuses. Barbara, we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You as well. You don't lead like everyone else, so your resources shouldn't look like everyone else's. I created the Game Changer Leadership Collection for high impact leaders like you, visionaries, change agents, decision makers who lead with intention and influence. This free high impact resource pulls from my leadership arsenal and delivers immediate actionable insights you can use right now to elevate your influence, lead with conviction, and drive lasting transformation. It's not just a toolkit, it's your first step toward leading at the level you were born for. Let me show you what's inside. The Leadership Edge Sampler. It's a preview of my 10 daily power skills to sharpen your influence and impact. The Influence Language Mini Guide. Essential phrases to increase your authority and build trust in every room you walk into. The Leadership Blind Spot Snapshot. Because the greatest risk are the ones we don't see. The Power of One Visual Aid. A reminder that even one decision, one tone, or one conversation can shift a team or stall a movement. The Executive Briefing Checklist. A go-to tool for high-stakes communication that drives clarity and alignment. The 5-minute accountability brief, a no-fluff framework to build a culture of ownership fast. And we have the Game Changer Ascension Model Overview, my proprietary leadership growth map to help you scale your influence with intention. These are the very same tools I use with executives, culture shapers, and elite teams. Leaders who know what's at stake and aren't here to play small. Because when you're called to shift systems, influence nations, and build legacies, you can't afford to lead on autopilot. This is where your next level begins. Download the Game Changer Leadership Collection today. It's free, it's strategic, and it's built for leaders who are born to shift the game. I'm Dr. Sherilyn Payne, and this is your Leadership Edge. Thank you for joining me on the Game Changer with Dr. Sherilyn, where we don't follow trends, we set them, and we don't just lead teams, we shift legacies. If today's message challenged, stretched, or inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, tag it, lead through it, because real leaders don't just consume wisdom, they multiply it. Want to go deeper? Subscribe to the Ultra Influential newsletter for exclusive tools, behind-the-scenes strategy, and weekly mindset shifts for the leader ready to move nations, markets, and minds. Visit www.smpistrategies.com or send a note to leadership@smpistrategies.com. And if you're ready for next level coaching or consulting, that positions you as the right leader at the right time in the right place? Let's talk. This is what we do, and we do it with precision, power, and purpose. Remember, change isn't just something you lead, it's something you become. Stay bold, stay brilliant, stay a game changer.